What is going on, guys, and welcome back to the channel. So if you've been following along, you know that we have a super cheap turbo Civic hatch that we've been working on for quite some time. A little while back, we did a full build on a D16Y8 to drop down into this car, and since then we have upgraded the fuel system, put a bigger turbo on it, and we have really been leaning on this thing, making over 30 pounds of boost on pump gas, which any of you guys are familiar, you know that that is much less than ideal. So we're going to try to start swapping the car over to E85. Now the problem with that is with E85 you need roughly a 30% bigger fuel system, and even a little bit bigger than that is ideal. Now a while back we started working with Clean Injection, and they sent us out a set of their 700cc injectors, which have been absolutely perfect for the power we've been trying to make as of now. But we're going to need a little bit bigger set of injectors to move forward with E85. So once again, we reached out to our boys over at Clean Injection, and they sent us out this nice little package here that contains a set of their 1500cc injectors, and we are super excited to get these things installed so that we're one step closer to running E85 on the super cheap turbo Civic. So let's get through the intro, get these installed so we can start tuning. Now that we've gotten through the intro, let's clean off the bench and open up our new package from Clean Injection and check out these 1500cc injectors so we can get them installed in the turbo Civic and get to tuning. Now that we've gotten through the intro, let's open up our new package from Clean Injection and check out our new 1500cc injectors. Make sure we don't harm the goods here. They always do such a nice job with the packaging, and I love the logos that they use. So right here we have a little extra care package, which I'll show you guys in just a second. Then we've got our injectors. Make sure there's nothing else in the box. Get this out of our way here, and let's check these things out. So as you guys can see, the Clean Injection boxes are absolutely awesome. I think I still have the old one from them. I'll show you guys it here in just a second. But I do always love their packaging. It's just super clean. It's super cool. And then the inside of the box is all labeled as well, Clean Injection. Pretty nice looking box here. And then they have a little installation guide card. So this is handy if you need it. It's right there. And then we can go ahead and open up the box with our injectors. Now let's start diving into the good stuff. So right here on top, we have a new set of wiring pigtails. This will allow us to have a direct plug and play swap from these injectors to our wiring harness. Now they make injectors for a ton of different make and model year vehicles, but with the Honda kits, they give you the option when you're ordering to put in what OBD system your car is running so that they can supply you with the proper pigtails to make it a direct plug and play swap. So now that we've got those set off to the side, let's see what else we've got in here. They always have some really nice lower grommets for the Honda intake manifolds. These are slightly different than the ones we're currently running on the car, so I'll have to go ahead and swap those out to these. They look like a really nice piece, and I'll show you guys a little bit closer once we get the package opened up. And then it also came with these little spacers, I'm guessing for the fuel rail, but we'll have to check it out once we get the car apart. So we'll set these off to the side as well. And now to the piece I am most excited about, our new injectors. And these things look absolutely sweet. They have some beautiful top hats on them. They're branded Clean Injection, and they're just an all-around gorgeous piece. They do use top quality injectors for cores before they work their magic with them. So these are a Bosch core and a beautiful injector. So let's go ahead, open one up. We'll take a closer look, and then we'll take a super quick look at the data sheet before we start getting these installed on the turbo Civic. These little bottom grommets are actually really sweet. These things are nice. They're all aluminum. They have a nice O-ring on them, and they're branded Clean Injection. I'll give you guys a closer look at all of this stuff here in a second, but those just definitely stood out to me when we opened them up. They're just a really nice all-around piece. And I do love the fact that with this particular kit, it also came with the little spacers that we might need for our fuel rail. So let's go ahead and get one of these injectors pulled out and take a closer look at it. So I went ahead and got one of these injectors pulled out, and I have to say, these things are absolutely beautiful. They have a really nice red anodizing with the Clean Injection logo on it. And then they always have nice O-rings and a little protector for the bottom to keep this thing safe during shipping and to keep any contaminants out, as well as their vacuum sealed packaging. Now these things look way too nice to be on the turbo Civic, but we are going to get them installed so that we can start turning this thing up and get it on E85. Now, real quick, before we do that, let's just take a look at their data sheet. They always provide a great set of data points right here in your data sheet that is flow matched to this injector. So let's take a peek at it real quick before we start getting these things installed. So if we look here at the flow matching data, these ones balanced out perfect. They're 1546 cc's each. So right across the board, we don't have any variances that we're going to need to compensate for. They are dialed right in. And then we have the injector offset data, which is 0.872 for each injector, and they are spot on. So once again, like I said, absolutely zero variances with these injectors. Now, if we go down here to the bottom, this is the part that we're going to be really concerned with, the injector voltage offset values in milliseconds. So as you guys can see right here, we have 43.5 psi, 55 psi, 70 psi, and 85 psi. And then for each of those pressures, they give you a bunch of different volts, and it goes right down the list. And that's going to be the information that we put into our tune to get this thing dialed in so the computer knows how to handle the new injectors. So like I said, guys, they give you all the information that we could need with this data sheet, and it has been extremely accurate as far as getting our 700 cc's installed, and I'm sure it's going to be no different with these 1500s. So now that we've gotten through the data, let's go ahead, head out to the car, and start getting these installed. Now that you guys have seen our new clean injection 1500 cc injectors, it's time to start pulling out our old 700 cc's and get these new 1500s in. Now, just in case you guys haven't seen this car before, we have built this thing on the channel completely. This is our super cheap turbo Civic. We picked it up and it had a D15 with an automatic transmission. So we swapped it out for a manual 5-speed and then did a full build on a D16Y8 right here on the channel. And we are running a full Evil Energy fuel system, except for a Walboro 450 liter per hour in-tank pump. And then we topped it off with a Max Peating Rods GT 3076R. And we built this turbo kit and everything you see here ourselves. So if you want to check that out, go back on the Honda playlist. We cover absolutely everything. Now, the first thing that we're going to have to do is get our 10AN breather line off. This one goes to our catch can along with the 10AN on the back of the block. But for now, we just need to disconnect this one so we can get access to our AEM fuel rail and start getting these 700 cc's out. Now, I do want to reiterate, the 700 cc CI clean injection injectors have been absolutely flawless, and we're definitely going to be putting them on the bench and saving them for another turbo Civic. They'd be absolutely perfect for a pump gas build. So let's get some tools out and get to work. We'll go ahead and get this breather out of our way. Now we can get our injectors unplugged and start pulling the fuel rail off. I also have a spare dipstick that I put in when we're working on it. As you can tell, I've broken the end off a couple of these. So I'm going to put this broken one in there so we don't do that to this one. And then we can start pulling our fuel rail off. We can pop the 10mm nuts on the fuel rail off. My rail only has 2 of them. I think some Hondas have 3. This one's just a 2-bolt. And then they have the little standoffs there. So we'll get those out of there and try not to drop them. Now, always be careful when you're popping your fuel rail or an injector out, because if you have fuel pressure, it will spray. So just be very careful. Now, like I said before, be very careful when you pop the rail for the first time. If there's pressure in there, it very well could spray you. Now that I've got the fuel rail with the injectors pulled up out of the way, I'm going to pop these stock rubber grommets that we have in there out. And then we can grab those new ones and test fit them and start mocking everything up. I'm going to pull one of the injectors out of the rail. Like I said, there's going to be a little bit of fuel leakage. We knew we didn't have pressure, but make sure you don't. These are the old 700 cc's that we were running for a while. These things were absolutely phenomenal. Like I said, I'm going to clean them up, set them on the bench, and we will keep them for another project. Might as well go ahead and pull the rest of the injectors out real quick. Of course, the one time I don't put a bucket under it, there's actually a decent amount of fuel in the rail, but it is what it is. So we'll pull that injector out. Now, if you have a set of injectors that you're pulling out that you want to reuse and they have the flow data and one of them is off, make sure you keep them in the order or mark them so you know which one that is. In our case, these clean injection 700s were a perfect match, so we can put them anywhere. As far as cylinder wise goes, it doesn't matter for us. So just keep that in mind though, depending on the injectors you're pulling out. So now that we've got all 4 of our old 700cc injectors out, I'm gonna set these aside, clean them up quick before we bag them up to make sure we keep them clean for the next project. As you guys seen, we got the 700cc injectors pulled out, and like I said, these things are really good for a pump gas street car or for a lower power E85 car. These would work out just fine. But for what we're trying to do with this thing, we need a little bit more injector. So now that we've got the 700cc's pulled out, I went ahead and grabbed one of our new 1500s. These things are so sweet, but if we hold them up next to our 700s, they're very similar in height. The 700s do seem to be just a touch shorter. Now I do have this little plastic cap on here. We'll pop that off real quick and we'll just get a rough idea. Yeah, they do seem to be just a tiny bit taller than our 700s are. Now they did include spacers with the kit, but we might have to do something a little bit different because I'm kind of already just about out of room as far as those standoffs go because of my AEM rail. If it was a stock rail, it'd probably be perfectly fine, but for our setup, we might have to modify something. And the reason I say that is because with the old setup, we had these really nice grommet adapters for the Honda stuff. You can see one in the grommet right here. This rubber piece is a factory Honda grommet. And then this is the piece that came with our 700cc injectors. And as you can see, it goes into it just like so that you can't push the injector through and cause a fire and potential damage to the car, which used to happen a lot back in the day with these D series. So this goes on there so that the injector seals tight against that and it can't push through the grommet. But these sit pretty low into the intake manifold. And the new grommet adapters that we have for the new injectors right here, really nice solid piece. I actually like these a lot. They're going to go right into that lower grommet hole. You're going to eliminate the stock grommet altogether. This has a nice O-ring on it that'll seal into the intake manifold. But if you stack them up next to each other, it does seem to be just a touch taller. So that mixed with the extra height from our new injector has me a little bit nervous that we might have to make up some height somewhere with some spacers and stuff. So we'll go ahead and figure that out when we get to that point. But for now, what I'm going to do is get everything prepped and ready to start installing our new ones so that we can test and see if we're going to have to come up with something to space it up. Now the first thing I'm going to do is just clean out the little area where our grommets sit. Make sure there's no debris in there, no oil. Then we're going to take a tiny bit of the ejector glide that came with our new injectors. I actually really like this stuff. And we're going to put just a tiny bit on the O-ring of the new grommets that came with our 1500s. Take our finger and just smear it around. This stuff is just going to help the O-ring slide in easier and give us a better ability of getting it in without ripping the O-ring. So we're just going to put a little bit of that on there. Then we can take our grommet. We're going to have the clean injection logo readable facing us just because I'm OCD like that. But you do want the clean injection logo up. We're going to get it lined up in there where you want it. And then just gently press it in. Should be a nice snug fit, but not so snug that you're going to rip an O-ring. Ours actually fit in there much better than some of the other branded ones that I've used for this. So that fit in there beautifully. Now we can go grab one of our injectors and start test fitting. Now with the new injector in hand, I'm going to take a little bit more of the ejector glide and just put a couple dabs on this O-ring and smear it in again, just like we did with the grommet. Try not to get any in the actual opening of the injector. Then we're going to do the same thing to this bottom O-ring real quick. Now how you want to do this is totally up to you. Personally, I like to try to put them in the rail itself first, but we'll see what happens here. Just wiggle them a little bit, turn them a little if you have to get them to slide in. You don't want it to pinch the O-ring or anything like that. Go ahead, get that in place. Drops right in. And honestly, guys, I think with our current setup, we're gonna be just about perfect. So we're gonna go ahead and use it just like this. We'll grab the other injectors, get them in there. It does look like we might have to put a tiny spacer under there, but not quite as much as comes with the kit. Once again, if you're running a factory setup with a factory fuel rail, the kit does come with little spacers from Clean Injection, but since we have an AEM rail and I've modified some other stuff in here, we might have to shim it ourselves, but we'll see if those little spacers fit. They're a very nice aluminum little spacer, but the injector does fit down in there perfectly, so that's awesome. Let's grab the next ones, get them in there, and then we'll start checking for our height. Now that we've got our height figured out, I'm just gonna go through here, clean up all of the spots for the grommets. We'll get our new grommet adapters put in, and start installing the new injectors. Now that we've got the intake manifold cleaned up, we're going to do the same thing for all of these grommet adapters. Just take a little bit of the ejector glide, put it on each O-ring, and then we'll smear it around it. And then we can get all of these installed and grab our injectors. Put our last grommet in, just like so. Make sure those are all seated good. Now we can grab our injectors and get those installed. We're going to do the same exact thing for each injector. Use some of the ejector glide on the O-rings. Just smear it right around. Like I was saying before, guys, I like to get them installed in the fuel rail first, and then we'll get them installed in those lower grommets. I'm just going to go through and carefully get them all installed in my AEM fuel rail, just like so. And now for the last one. Now we can carefully line them up with all of our lower grommets and get them all slid in. I'm going to line it up with those studs, line up the O-rings, make sure you don't tear any of them, and nothing's going to get pinched. Then slowly wiggle it, and it'll drop right in just like that. All right, now we can bolt them down and grab the pigtail adapters and get them plugged in. Make sure we get these nice and snug down, because if your fuel rail ever came loose and that popped off, you could spray fuel everywhere. So just make sure you tighten it down nice, but don't strip anything. As you guys seen, we've got all of our new clean injection 1500cc injectors installed, and these things are looking sweet. Now we can get our pigtails hooked up, plug in some injector data, and try to fire this thing up. Alright guys, we got them all plugged in. Let's hook up our breather line, punch in some injector data, and try to fire this thing up. Now that we've got our new injectors installed, it's time to take a look at our data sheet and start punching in some information into our tune. Now, I'm not going to go super crazy in depth on this because I have done this already with their 700cc injectors, as well as a couple other different injectors in the past that you guys can go back and check it out. But just in case you guys missed it, I will give the brief explanation of why we're going to do what we're going to do here and what information from this data sheet that we need to pay attention to. So most importantly is the injector voltage offset values that we have right here at the bottom of our sheet. So as you guys can see, they are very base fuel pressure dependent. So as you can see at 43.5 PSI, these are 1500 and we'll call it 50cc injectors. And then if you bump up to 55 PSI base pressure, they're 1700cc injectors. 70 PSI base, they're almost 2000cc injectors. And then at 85 PSI base, they're almost 2300cc injectors. Now, if we needed to absolute maximize these 1500cc injectors, we could go ahead and run like a 55 PSI base pressure, but since we don't need to, I'm going to go with a lower pressure because the lower pressure should help us idle better, because when you go with big injectors, sometimes they can be tricky to idle. I'm hoping we can get these ones lined out. I'm pretty confident we can. But we do have 43 PSI base pressure, so we're going to be working off of this chart right here under the 1546cc column. So what we're going to do is, in our case, we're going to go into our Hondata here, and we are under the injectors tab. Now, before you do this, if you have a good set that is in the car that the car is running good on now, I definitely recommend going ahead and saving that file, kind of as a safety save, so you have something to go back to if you ever have any issues in the future, or if you want to put those injectors back in for whatever reason. So take a second real quick and just go ahead and save the current file that you have open, and then we'll go ahead and put this injector data in. Under the fuel injectors tab, you're going to see injector voltage compensation. So what we're going to do is we're going to fill in the information that we have. So for our first section here under 8 volts, we have 2.35, so 2.35. For 10 volts, we have 1.613. For 12 volts, we have 1.136. For 14 volts, we have 0.875. And for 16 volts, we have 0.682. Now that we have that put in there, we don't have information for the 24.5 or for the 0. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make the 24.5 a smaller number than the 16 column. So in our case, I'm just going to go with 0.55. And then for the 0 column, I'm going to make that a taller number than our 8 column. So in our case, let's go 2.55. So now that we've got that injector data input into our computer, the next thing we're going to do is up here where it says current injector size. We have it at 700 cc because that's what we had in here. I'm going to change that to 1546. And in this tab, I think that's about all we need to change. So there's only a couple other little things that I'm going to change before we go out to the car and try to start it up. Now, since we went from 700cc injectors to 1500cc injectors, our scaling ratio is roughly 0.49. You can figure out your scaling ratio by taking your old injector size and dividing it by your new injector size. So like I said, that gave us roughly 0.49. So what I'm going to do in this cranking base pulse table is I'm just going to go along the bottom here and multiply each of these numbers by 0.49 to give us our new number. So I'm going to go through and get that done really quick. For our cranking fuel trim, I'm also going to do the same thing with that. So we're going to be right around 12% when we get started here. Throttle tip in, I'm going to leave that at subtract 30. We can come back through and change that once we get the car running. I almost completely forgot. I do want to disable our electronic boost control before we go out to the car, so that if this thing does fire up and run and we try to take it for a ride, it doesn't instantly try to make 25 or 30 PSI. So for now, we'll just go ahead and fully disable that so it reverts back to wastegate, making about 5 to 6 PSI. We'll see where it stands. Then we can enable our electronic boost control and start creeping up on it from there. All right, let's go ahead and try to get this file flashed real quick to see if it'll start. We've got live data, so let's go ahead and flash it. All right, we've got it uploaded. Now keep in mind, it's probably gonna crank longer than it normally would because I already have the key forward, so the pump isn't priming anymore. When you normally start it, you cycle the key and you're cranking it with the pump still running. So whenever we have to hook up the laptop first, it always cranks a little longer. So just keep that in mind. We'll work that out a little bit later. For now, I just want to see if we can get it to run at all. So let's go ahead, hit the key and try to start it up. Nope. So let's give it a little bit of cranking fuel. Let's give it 20%. Fired right up with 20%. Now let's see what happens as we let it run for a second. Sucks because the way I have my AFR gauge wired, we don't get a reading for a minute until the sensor goes through its heat up cycle. I should have wired it to accessory or something else, because even if you let it get to the numbers, when you go to crank it, it resets. So that's my fault, but we'll have to wait for that to get to its setting so that we can see what it's actually reading. All right, so it's really rich. We're at 11.7 here on startup. Let's see what it does as it starts to try to idle here. And I don't really want to start messing with my fuel map yet, because right now we have a 14% coolant correction. So let's go to that real quick, actually. Let's change that down to 9. Right around 14.6, 14.7. And it's actually pretty smooth. Now, as you guys can see, I do have only 9 degrees in it at idle, and that's for some reason I've always had to pull timing out. We don't have an idle air control valve, and if I don't pull that timing out, it does not seem to want to idle very good. It'll try to idle way high on me. So we've obviously got a whole bunch more dialing to do here, but we are working it out, and it's going to take some fine-tuning to get this thing running as smooth as I'd like. So I'm going to go through here, keep making some changes, and then tomorrow we'll take this thing out and make some pulls. Should be just a couple seconds for you guys. So I spent a couple more minutes last night messing around with this, trying to get it dialed in. And when I say a couple minutes, I mean literally a couple minutes. Then we came back out here this morning, I fired it up cold, let it run for a few minutes, and I spent another couple minutes messing with it. And we've got it to a point now where it's idling pretty decent, right around the 14.7 mark. So of course, as I show the camera, it goes 14.3, but we've had it pretty steady at 14.7 for a while now. But what I found out with tuning a bunch of different big injectors, you almost always need to run them a little bit richer at idle, especially on an engine this small. You've got to keep in mind, we only have 1.6 liters to work with. We have very low compression with our piston and rod setup, and we have a ported head with an aftermarket cam. All those things are working against us for a nice smooth idle. So I have had to go in here and play around with it a little bit, but I will say that these injectors have been extremely consistent. I've had issues in the past where you get something dialed in, but then every time you start the car, it's something completely different, or once they get some heat in them, they act completely different as well. These ones have been spot on. They do everything I've told them to do, but I've obviously had to tune around having a bigger injector. Now, when we get the car on E85, it might actually be easier to get it to idle clean because it takes more fuel, so the injector is actually working a tiny bit more. But like I said, with 1.6 liters and 1500cc injectors, you're trying to turn those injectors down so far for this little engine to idle that they just don't like it very much. It's very hard to do. So we've just been working with small engine, big injector things. So we're gonna go ahead and richen it up a little bit at idle. I'd rather have it run a little bit richer at idle and be a little smoother than have a perfect 14.7. So I'm gonna go ahead and throw a little bit more fuel at it at idle, get this thing to smooth out a little more, and then we'll go take it for our first drive. All right, let's go take this thing for its first drive and see how it does. Wickedly off, but definitely a little off, especially once we started getting into boost. So we'll definitely have to add some more fuel in there for boost. Keep in mind, we also have it with boost control turned off, so it's going to be lazy and it's not going to make much boost because we're just on wastegate. Yeah, it goes super lean under boost, so we'll have to give it some more fuel up there. Yeah, definitely have to make some changes. All right, let's go take a look at the file and make some changes. All right, guys, so basically what I did was I just went in here and added a bunch of fuel all through boost from 0.5 PSI on. I just highlighted the whole thing and added almost 20% fuel. Now I did taper it in a little bit in 0.5 and 4 PSI, but there on, I added a bunch of fuel so that I'd rather go rich than go lean later. And then in our VTEC table, I did the same thing. I highlighted the whole thing and added about 20% fuel. Right now, we're just trying to rough it in and get it close. And then once we have it in a safe range, we can come back in and dial it in. Like I said, I'd much rather have it rich and have to dial it back lean than go the other way. So we went ahead and flashed that. Let's go take it for another ride and see if it's any better. It looks much closer already, but we'll have to see. I made some pretty big changes, so. Also, keep in mind, guys, I am by no means a tuner. I have learned all of this with some input from some good friends and just by doing it. So I have a ton left to learn. I learn more every time I do it, but just keep that in mind here. Don't crucify me too bad. I'm still learning, but we are getting this thing dialed in. So I don't know how well you guys can see it, but drivability is already starting to look really good. A couple zeros and a whole bunch of ones and twos. So that's really close. I'm not going to worry too much about that. It doesn't need to be absolutely perfect. We're not going for stock car tuning here. It doesn't need to be perfect like the OEMs do it. But what we want is we want it to be consistent and we want it to be good under boost. That's our main concern with tuning a turbo car. So I'm going to go ahead and look at the VTEC table because our normal low cam table is looking really good already. now. It looks like it only made 7.2 PSI, so it didn't make much boost. It just felt really good. Honestly, it was pulling really strong for 7 pounds of boost. So really happy to see that though. But let's go ahead and take a look at our table and see what we've got as far as fueling goes. I went ahead and made a few more changes. I pulled some more fuel out of VTEC and I tried a couple little things. So let's go see if it worked. Definitely was closer that time, so that's a plus. Still went a little bit fat way up top, but I got that little transition area much closer. It was 11.5 for a good part of that, so really happy with what we're seeing there. As you guys can see, the weather has gotten pretty crappy, so probably not going to be able to do much. So I'll probably get back with you guys here in the morning, but we'll see what we can get for data anyways. That's only on 8 PSI, so this thing's not doing too bad for being on 8 PSI, but we still have that little hiccup in the AFR where it goes, it's good, lean, then back to good, and then it gets rich. So we've definitely got some more fine tuning we need to do, but we're chipping away at it a little by a little. Tomorrow I actually have to take a pretty long drive, so I'll probably end up taking this thing just so that we can keep chipping away at the tune and see if we can't get this thing dialed in. All right, let's go ahead and give it another shot before we turn on the boost control and see what it does. It was definitely a whole lot closer that time, guys. I don't know if you've seen it. It had one little like lean curve in it, but it was much better than I had it before. So we'll go ahead and take a look at that real quick and turn the boost control on, and I'll be good with it. So I went ahead and looked at that log. Everything looked pretty good. We had a tiny little spot where it got lean. I added a little bit of fuel there, but I also turned on the boost control. We're only running it at 45% duty cycle right now, and I have quick spool at 5 PSI, so it's not going to be anything crazy, but it should make more boost than we've been making. So let's go give it a shot and see how close it is. I'm going to just roll into it and see what it does this time. As you guys see, we still have that little bit of a lean spot, so I'll have to take a look at that quick, see what we can do to fix it, and then we're also going to have to lean it out a little bit up top. So we'll take a look at that real quick and go from there. Still seemed a little fat up top, so we might have to do some more trimming. but it definitely felt smoother and ran good. So we'll go ahead and take another look, make another run, and see what happens. That time I remembered to log it, so let's go look at the log. Was definitely more stable, just a little bit on the rich side. So let's make another change and hit it again. Perfect, guys. That's what we've been looking for this whole time. I needed to change the shape of the map. Now, like I've always said, I am by no means a tuner. I didn't know that was a thing. I thought the fuel map kind of followed your torque curve, but apparently it doesn't. I think it's more based off of a compensation per injector, because I could not get a map to look right or work right until I reshaped the entire thing. And now I think we actually have it much closer than it was. So I'm gonna pull off, we're gonna take a look at this log, I'll make some more changes, get it even more dialed in, and go from there. Guys, that was almost 11.5 on the money the entire time. That was a big step up from where I've been struggling with this thing. 100% not the injector's fault, just a me learning to tune kind of thing. I learned a lot from tuning these bigger injectors, but we have got this thing extremely close for the boost that we're running right now. And once we make a certain curve that works, all you have to do is copy and paste it, and you can bump it up a little bit, and usually it'll stay pretty close. But the challenge is getting that first map line drawn. So now that we've got that done, I'm gonna go take a look at the map again. We'll start copying and pasting that, moving it up, and then once I'm comfortable with it, we'll turn the boost controller up some more and make some more power. All right, let's see if I can do this without spilling my Baja Blast. My Baja Blast. AFR didn't look too bad. All right, guys, so as you can see, it is the next day, and we're gonna go take this thing for another ride and see how close we've got it. All right, so I made a couple more little fine-tuned changes. Let's go give it another try. Take a look at that log. I think I'm going to be pretty happy with that one. Alright guys, so as you've seen, we have been chipping away at getting these 1500cc injectors dialed in, and Clean Injection makes it extremely easy for us by providing all of the data that we need to plug into the laptop. Now, like I've said many times, I am by no means a tuner, and I learn something every time I get behind that laptop. I'm sure someone that's proficient in tuning could have had it dialed in a quarter of the amount of runs that we made, but we got it dialed in, and this thing is absolutely ripping. Now, as you guys know, the whole point of going with 1500cc injectors was to give us room when we switch the car over to E85, which is going to be coming up here in the very near future. So make sure to stick around because we're finally going to be putting these 1500cc injectors to work. Now, once again, I have to say a huge shout out to Clean Injection, and if you guys need anything from them, make sure to check out their website. They offer much more than just fuel injectors, but if you need a set of fuel injectors, use the discount code in our description below to save yourself a few bucks. As always, I appreciate you guys for checking out the channel. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, ring that bell, and check us out on all of our other social media platforms, Facebook, TikTok, and Bought to Build Official on Instagram. And we will catch you on the next one.